My mother was an amazing woman, and she was a fabulous caregiver for my father. But she was not a saint. She experienced every emotion that all caregivers experience. It was anger, fear, frustration, fatigue, guilt, depression, and grief, and she experienced them over and over and over again for 6.5 years. Now, the first time that she wrote about getting really angry and losing it with Quentin was the first summer after he had his stroke. And it was harvest time, and she had fixed lunch for the whole crew. There were 10 people, and after lunch, she just said, I am deathly tired. I have to lay down and take a nap. And so they had just stretched out, and she was just in that sweet spot of drifting off. When my dad heard my brother Gene's voice come over the business band radio, and he was saying, "Fire! Candy, your combine is on fire!" And my mother wrote, and she said, "Well, I don't have to tell you that a wheat field that's on fire is a major emergency." So I jumped up out of bed as fast as I could go, and I ran to the phone, and I dialed 911. And when the guy answered, I said, "This is Mrs. Quentin Cuban, and we've got a wheat field on fire." And he said, "Okay, Mrs. Cuban, where's the fire?" And I said, "It's 4 miles west of where the drive-in theater used to be." And I hung up. And then I thought, well, that wasn't good. I should call him back and give better directions. But then I saw Quentin was sitting there, and he was struggling to get his socks and his shoes on. So I helped him. Then I helped him out to the pickup, and I got him in there. And as we were backing out of the driveway, he said, "I want you to take me to the field where Larry was plowing earlier." And I said, "Well, what do you think you're going to do?" And he said, "I'm going to take the tractor and the plow, and I'm going to plow a fire break." Well, I knew that was the right thing to do, but I didn't think he was the right person to do it because, as you know, since the stroke, his thinking processes are slower than molasses, and his right foot weighs about 800 pounds, so you put him in anything that has a brake or a clutch or an accelerator, and it's just kind of a precarious situation, but I didn't want to argue with him. So I just dropped him off at the field, and I guess that big old plume of black smoke did a better job of directing the volunteer fire department from Conway and the ambulance from McPherson, because they were all there by the time I got there, and there was just this beehive of activity. People that were driving by stopped to help, and the neighbors came, and passersby, and it was kind of amazing, really. But then I looked up, and it was just this moment of suspended silence that I saw Quentin coming down the road in his John Deere tractor, and he pulled into the field, he stopped, he set the plow, and he took off straight as a string. You know, I've heard people say that a man's home is his castle. To Quentin, it was always more of a rest stop. He would come to the house when it was time to eat or bathe or sleep, but his castle was always a combine or a tractor. Well, at any rate, by 3:30, they got the fire out, and miraculously, no one was hurt. They saved all of the equipment and even most of the wheat. So I got on the radio, and I called Quentin, and I said, "Crisis is over, Quentin, time to come home." And he said, "You know, there's still a little hot stubble. I think I'm just going to stay a little bit and help Larry out." And I didn't think it was a good idea. But to tell you the truth, the thought of having a couple of hours all to myself in the house without the TV or one of his talking books blaring, or without him shaking that damn bell for me to come and do one thing or another for him, it sounded like such luxury. I let him stay. Well, he came in for supper at 6:30. He sat down, he ate, he stood up, put his hat on, headed to the back door, and I said, "Well, where do you think you're going?" He said, "I'm just going to go out and help Larry a little bit longer." And I called him on the radio at 8:30, and I said, "You planning to work all night?" And he said, "Oh, no, I'm not going to work all night. I'll be in just a little bit." Well, I'm not at all proud of myself, but when he finally came dragging in at 9:30, I met him at the back door hollering, "If you have another stroke, it had better, by God, kill you!" And then I went flouncing off to the living room, and he came following me in, and he was apologizing. He said, I just didn't realize how late it had gotten. And I said, well, you know what? You don't have to be particularly smart to know that when the sun goes down and the moon comes out and the stars start to shine, that it's time to quit. I think I was entitled to be angry and scared. Last year, when he told me he was retiring, I said, what does that mean? And he said, it means I'm not going to work after supper or on Sundays anymore. But he still came dragging in every night between 10 and 11 o'clock, and I am absolutely convinced that the reason that he had the stroke is that he worked too hard and he got too worn out. But now I'm sorry that I yelled at him the way that I did. He hasn't had much energy since, and who knows if it's because he did work too hard and wear himself out the other day, or whether it's because he was just reminded so forcefully that he can't live and work the way he has for the last 48 years. So, do you get it that Madelyn was angry? Oh, yeah. And can you blame her? You know, I can't. Her husband has had a stroke. It has completely changed and upended his life. And it has also completely changed hers. She no longer has any freedom to come and go. She has zero time to herself, and he is with her almost 24/7. And she's had to drop out of a lot of her volunteer organizations and her social groups. And it's not fun for Madelyn to be Quentin's caregiver. So, do you think you can forgive her for getting angry? You know, I can. But here's the tougher question. Do you think you can cut yourself some slack the next time you lose it? That's a little tougher, isn't it? So, if this video resonated with you, if you can identify with Madelyn, I'd like to invite you to subscribe and share with anyone else who might benefit from getting a little dose of hope, humor, and heart, and some encouragement in their inbox every day. Bye-bye for now. I hope to see you soon.